Congratulations, Bea. Congratulations, Diego, and thank you so much for having me. Good morning, all. So there are some very basic principles that can see us through life. And one of the basic principles is when something breaks, it will never be the same. But it can be something else, and that's what we have learned from so many different cultures. Maybe not ours, but we're getting there. Broken nature is an idea that started in 2013 just by looking at the world. You know, that's what always happens with contemporary design shows. They kind of bubble up and come at you. And seeing and noticing everything that was happening, I was starting to think of all the different threads that connected us to nature and also to ourselves, because we as humans are part of nature, and trying to think of which were completely severed, which could be replenished or threaded anew. And that's when an exhibition was first proposed to MoMA, and MoMA and my colleagues decided to wait because maybe the time was not ripe yet. I mean, it's always been ripe, but you will agree with me, there's been something happening in the past few years that really has brought us all together in understanding that something needs to be done. So when I was asked by the Triennale di Milano, where I started my career when I was in my 20s, like really bringing water to the curator, I proposed this theme that was maybe 5 years old, but also 5 years young, and they accepted it. So Broken Nature became the 22nd Triennale di Milano. Triennale di Milano that's been going on for almost 100 years, and that has been about looking at what architecture and design can do to have a role in the making and unmaking of the world. What you see here is the picture that the wonderful graphic designers chose for the cover of the catalog. It's a glacier in Switzerland that's being covered with fabric to protect it from erosion. What have we come to that we have to dress glaciers in order for them not to melt in front of our eyes? And as you probably know, there's been the first memorial for a glacier that's been held in Iceland a few months ago. So we're really getting to a point, and I don't have to make the shopping list of the dreadful events that are happening in the world, that we really need to do something. Now, the exhibition Broken Nature comes from an idea that many people found difficult to stomach. I believe that as a human species, we will become extinct, because that's what happens. It's part of life to die, and our species will die as well. We don't have much control on that fact. We have a little control on the when, but we have a lot of say on the how. And that's what I propose with the exhibition. It's let's design our own really elegant extinction. So we leave a legacy that will be remembered, maybe even incorporated by the next dominating species, one or many. So from this very simple notion, which is another thing that can lead you through life, I also started looking at different ways to think about the politics of nature. We know that famous phrase from Bruno Latour, and also all the different facets of how design and architecture could interfere with the process and make the process better. And Félix Guattari has always been very helpful. He was one of the founders of Ecosophie, and it was about changing minds and behaviors in order to change the environment around us. It's something that any designer knows and any architect knows. Design can really act on behaviors, not only on functions and on immediate needs. This is what came of the Triennale. It's a beautiful layout, an installation by Studio Folder, who also designed the catalog with an image, a graphic image by Anna Kulacek, and from that moment on, what I usually do with exhibitions. The first thing to know is another principle that's very important in life is what you don't know. And we're very ignorant. So every time what I do is to put together a really valiant advisory board. And in this case, I had an advisory board that could help me cover different parts of the world and also cover what I didn't know, from system science to architecture and technology to biodesign. What we need in Italy, we call tuttologa, which means I'm an omniologist. I know a little bit of everything, but not enough of any single topic. So you could call me a T-shaped or a comb-shaped person, but this is the team that we put together right away. And also, the curatorial team is always the most important part of any adventure. And you see them here taking over the Triennale before our installation started. From left to right, Erika Petrillo, Ala Tanir, who's now working on the Biennale together with Hashim Sarkis, yours truly, and Laura Mairan. And with this, we started the whole adventure. I'm here today to take you through the ride in 15 minutes. So I will not delve on the individual pieces, but I'll narrate the exhibition, and I'll tell you how we decided to make this point clear. What we wanted to advance was the idea of restorative design. Restorative comes from restaurant. In 18th century France, the idea that you can eat food that is healthy and good for you, because they thought bouillon was very good for you, so that's good, and also have a good, convivial, pleasant experience. So we can be responsible, we can be all of the different adjectives that we've been using, sustainable, we don't use green, we can be ethical without sacrificing the pleasure of being with other human beings, the pleasure of doing something that also nurtures our intellect and not only our rationality, nurtures also our emotional side, not only our rational side. We started making a list of the different strategies that one could have for this idea of restorative design. The most simple, the most trite in a way are reusing, recycling, using less, but there's many other ways to also think about saving energy or being more responsible, from just strategic augmentation, that is one of the cybernetics ideas for the future, to also amending policies and harnessing pollution as opposed to just trying to reduce it. One can design with so-called waste by considering waste a new material. So you'll see that the exhibition was trying to show many of these different strategies, and this is the great set of icon that Anna Kulacek, who's a great Ukrainian designer that's been living in New York for a few years, but you might know her because she was also involved in the Strelka identity and in many others graphic projects, did for us. This was just a list of possible acupressure points that not only designers and architects, but also citizens could act upon to make things change and to take a new direction. The graphics here by Anna is really quite beautiful. You can see more online. She's a great graphic designer. So here is how the Triennale looked when we opened it. The graphic is great, the building is always the same, and actually right now the new leadership with Stefano Boeri as a president is trying to bring it back to its splendor, the Muzio years of the 1930s with a more naked architecture. And the entrance itself was about really moving on the great staircase. Fascistic architecture is always very grand and enables you to try and tone it down, but not too much, to get to the opening of the exhibition. The beginning was at the large scale. We had 3 goals in mind for the exhibition. It was an exhibition for citizens. We wanted really to make it be for everyone. And the good thing about Milan, where I am from, is that people love design and are really interested in it. They don't make differentiations between scale. Architecture is part of design, and everybody goes and everybody's interested. When there's the furniture fair in Milan every April, I go to my bakery and my baker starts asking, is the fair good this year? Can I have tickets? Where should I go? So it really is a citywide feast. And I was sure that citizens would flock to the Triennale because it's one of the points of reference. So our goals were, number one, we want everyone that comes here to leave with a sense of what they can do in their everyday life to just add a little brick to the wall of change. Actually, I should say, my essay starts with the famous Bucky Fuller metaphor of the trim tab, that every human being can be a trim tab, and if we all move in the same direction, we can move the gigantic transatlantic of nations and even of Earth towards the direction that we find better. So anybody could be a trim tab in some way. Then we wanted to give citizens a sense of long time, because that's one of the big issues. We're not able to imagine the world beyond the 1, 2, 3 generations that we can physiologically feel in our reproductive system. So how do you give people a sense of long time? And the third was to give people a sense of the fact that we live in systems, that we have to think of not actions and reactions, but rather reverberations. And we have to try and start imagining what our actions can mean in faraway places or faraway fields of action. To do so, we started very much at the large scale. You see here the first commission, that is Neri Oxman. It's to the sides. You see it here. Neri Oxman and the Mediated Matter Group. It's an experiment of trying to use melanin at an architectural scale. You can, of course, imagine the practice practical benefits of a building whose facade changes and becomes darker to protect the building and the interior from the sun, the savings in energy. But there's also this beautiful side to it. The project was born in Cape Town in South Africa on a prompt by the Mandela Foundation, thinking of a monument that is almost like a Wailing Wall that uses melanin that has been at the basis of so much injustice and crisis in the world in the past centuries as the motivating and changing element to it. The second commission, it was also at the beginning. We started out really at the large scale with the images of change by NASA that show the before and after of different parts of the world, before and after either natural or human-made disasters, before and after in 3 months or 3,000 years. But it was really important to show that changes exist, that they're not just imagination. And behind, you see Giorgia Lupi's and accurate, Giorgia is now at Pentagram, visualization of millennia of human existence that were juxtaposed or connected and entangled with instead cosmic variations, imbalances, and movements of stars and variations on the planet. We then moved into a section that was almost like a natural history museum of the future, a beautiful museum in which you could see plastic glomerates, the work of Kelly Jasbach, who's a Canadian artist, who has been showing these fossils that you can find in Hawaii that have plastic in them. In the future, we might find fossils that actually have residues of plastic. And similarly, the world of imperfectly known animals by Mandy Barker, who photographs under microscope the debris of plastic one can find in the ocean. But once again, I'm not going to delve on the objects. So cosmic scale, natural history museum of the future, and then some of the long time ideas, and I have to delve on this particular object because it's fantastic. This is actually, I'm going to show you the video here. The little octopus there is Mercy. It's the work of Aki Inomata, who took a fossil of an ammonite that was the ancestor of octopi many, many years ago, many millennia ago, and reproduced it with resin in 3D printing and let it be next to Mercy. Mercy, who is an octopus and has shed its shell millennia ago, immediately after looking at it for a few minutes, just whoop, swept in. Like the call of millennia ago was still there for the octopus, even though so much had passed and so much had been shed. So this sense of long time is something that we really wanted to show, and we moved from that to the idea of restoring some of the threads in the most like literal sense of the term. So here's the work of Alex Goad, Mars, how to replenish the coral reef using 3D printing and ceramics, and at the same time the speculative work of Sputniko trying to instead replenish the fields in Fukushima using seeds of plants that can absorb radiation. Interventions about practical problems with water at different scale, for instance, in the work of Woo's architects in Brazil, also gave a sense of the idea of restorative design while moving in systems, slowly but surely. The third commission in order of apparition was Birdsong by Sigil. You might be familiar with Sigil. They have shown at the Biennale of Venice and in many other places. They always do work that has 1 foot wherever the commission is and 1 foot in Syria. And they always try to give something back with the money they get from the commission to the place. In this particular case, it was a celebration of birds in Syrian culture, and it had also a repercussion or a part of the commission in the Jolan Heights. Beautiful work that we hope to bring to MoMA, where we will have bits and pieces of broken nature starting in the summertime. From this idea cosmic to restoration to everyday life, how everybody could do something even small to change things around. From thinking of how to live with robots in the future to using fabric instead of sunscreen in order to protect ourselves from the sun when possible, because the sunscreen deposits a film over the ocean and can be really toxic. To also using biodegradable pregnancy kits and making sure that ER personnel understand that women have a different way of describing heart attacks than men, and therefore trying to see when a heart attack is happening, because so many women are still dying of heart attack because people are not able to understand that they're having a heart attack. From that, we moved slowly but surely into circularity and systems with the Capsula Mundi, which is a beautiful egg for green burial. And then from that into the idea of building in a new way with the work, for instance, of David Benjamin and the Living that you're probably also familiar with. So using fewer materials, using better materials, and trying to build, incorporating natural cycles and sometimes also natural agents into the way things are built. From that, we moved also, this is also the work of Neri Oxman, the Silk Pavilion, which, by the way, will be at MoMA. We'll have an exhibition on Neri starting next month. I'm installing it right now. And also looking at circularity, showing how materials can be replenished, not only just to recycle, but also to replenish other parts of life. And this was the work of Studio Swine that was actually enacted in Sao Paulo. It was the idea of using aluminum cans with a portable foundry that would transform them into stools that then would replenish street life. So this idea of circularity is not only material, it's also life in itself. The fourth commission is the beautiful work by Forma Fantasma. You might know them, pupils of Enzo Mari, if not directly, spiritually, they're some of the best representatives. The idea of using design as a political act by showing beautiful, incredibly elegant objects that make a point that then could convince, like Pied Pipers, many others to follow. This is showing that electronic waste can be transformed into great office furniture, but in a way, these pieces that you see here are just the Trojan horses for a deep investigative project on the labor crimes and all the environmental crimes that happen with the recycling of e-waste or the non-recycling of e-waste all over the world. So these objects were there, but so were interviews with some of the people that are involved in this illegal trade. Very interesting work, and Forma Fantasma is doing the same at the Serpentine in a month with the lumber trade. It's really fascinating. We were very happy to host Algae Platform by Atelier Luma, a project that tries to show people how one of the effects of our pollution, which is the proliferation of algae, can be instead harnessed to make biomaterials, biopolymers that can be 3D printed to replenish material culture locally. They also did this project in Istanbul at the Triennial a few years ago with beautiful nargile and other objects from Turkish culture. Well, you know, you can't do an exhibition these days without forensic oceanography or forensic architecture. And sure enough, they had to be there. We loved their work so much. And it was exemplary of not only of the new power of architecture and design to really speak up and to speak up to the powers that be, and hold them up to standards that are higher, but also to look at systems. So here is the third goal, the looking at systems, as was the gorgeous work of Kate Crawford and Vlad Anjoler, The Anatomy of an AI System. You probably know a lot about Kate because right now she has just installed and toured a work with Trevor Paglen about how AI learns faces. But this is the anatomy of an Amazon Echo, both hardware and software from beginning to end. So where you source the materials, but also how you create and how you educate the AI behind it. A really interesting and amazingly informative project. At the end of the show, empathy. In a way, all you need is love can be a silly or a very profound way to think of life. And respect, if you don't think simply of love, but you think of respect, respect is what rules everything. And understanding other species is what matters. So here is the work of Moya, Tales of Agriculture. This is an anime and a manga from Japan about this boy that sees and can speak to bacteria and microbes. And here's Thomas Twaits, our fabulous hero who transformed himself into a goat to escape the vagaries of human life, and for 4 days went and lived with goats who actually accepted him as one of their own. This is like beautiful, beautiful work that will remain in our memory, and actually I'm trying to study it even more. Mustafa Farouki of the Lab for Architecture in Brooklyn taught us how to instead put ourselves in angels' shoes, and using angels as a metaphor for migrants today, talked about facilities to actually bring in and onboard, one of those favorite words that I detest, onboard angels in New York City. They come through the Williamsburg Bridge, then they go to Governor's Island where they're given a passport and sex, because angels have no sex. So it's really an interesting way to think of what it means to still have borders and still have this differentiation. At the end of the show was also the work of this fabulous Latinx photographer that unfortunately passed away too early for me to get to know her. I fell in love with her work after a New Yorker article. She did these beautiful works, many others, but I loved this in which she said that she identified with boulders. How beautiful is that? And that's her body, her self-portrait in nature. There was more to try and understand other species besides this beautiful okinaganode, this use of seaweed as material, was also the great animal orchestra from the Fondation Cartier. We brought it in and we installed it there. People could listen to screenscapes, to soundscapes of all over the world and feel over the years which birds, which species had disappeared, and also see it visually. It was really poignant and also terrifying in a way. Since it's triennial, there were also national participations, and they were great. I'm sorry that I didn't talk about them in depth, but Australia won, and deservedly so. And everything ended with Patricia Piccinini and Sanctuary, called a sculpture that tried to transcend time, space, age, species, to show that love truly conquers all. And one of the aspects of the exhibition that made me happier is that people told me that they were moved by it. That's what we want when we curate and when we want to make a point. And also the kids of Fridays for the Future elected the Triennale as the place where all protests would begin. And I was super proud of that. I thank my curatorial team because they gave me a great gift, and I thank all the public that came and you today for listening to me. Thank you so much.